So suppose you're given that A6 is negative 14 and A8 is negative 20. Can you find A7 and A15? By the way, there's more than one way to do this problem. So stare at that for a second. Remember, this is a nice trick. Let's suppose, even though it doesn't say find it, let's suppose we're going to find AN. That's going to be our method of solving it. Find AN, and then we can just plug in 7 and plug in 15 to generate A7 and A15. So if we want to find AN, write the generic formula down. That's a good starting point. Now, what does that formula tell you you need?
A1, N, and D.
Right. Well, to get AN, actually, all you need is A1 and D, right? Because if it's AN, it should be a formula in terms of N, right? So if you want the generic AN formula, this formula tells you you need A1 and D. That's going to be a theme of this class. If you're looking for a formula and you know the generic form of the formula like we have here, write it down because it tells you the steps. You don't have to write down step 1, step 2, step 3. If you write down what you're looking for, it tells you what you need to find. Oh, you want AN, which is a formula in terms of N. There it is, except you need to fill in A1 and D for this particular problem. Can anybody think of an easy way to find D?
Find the difference between A6 and A8 and then divide by 2.
Yeah. So if you list out all the terms, I mean, we can't do it, but we could do it generically, right? A1, A2, A3, A4. I didn't even need these down here, but just to put it in context, A5, A6, A7, and A8. Probably should separate them by commas because they're not being multiplied together or anything. Then what am I given? I'm given this guy, A6 is negative 14, and I'm given this guy, A8 is negative 20, right? If I were thinking recursively, what do I do to get to A7? I just add D, right? What do I do to go from A7 to A8? I add D. So how many D's is A8 away from A6? 2 of them. So if I just find the difference between them and divide by 2, won't I have D? Okay. So let's do that. So D, I mean, that's just one way to do this. There are other ways. So D is equal to negative, so to find the difference, we're going to take negative 20, that's A8, right? And subtract negative 14. So take the number further down the list, right? And subtract, take A8 minus A6. So let me write out what I just did there. So this guy is your A8, negative 20, and negative 14 is your A6. And then what do you get here? So this is D. So, add, right? Subtract negative 14, add 14. What is that? Negative. So I get D is, is that going to be D or 2D? Yeah, 2D. Okay. Then what do? D is, just divide both sides by 2. D is negative 3.
Yep.
Oh, all right. So if I were feeling lazy, I don't actually need to get AN. I could just add negative 3 to get A7, add negative 3 to A6, right? So there's more than one way to do this. I could fill in this formula, or I could just take the A6, which is negative 14. So this is going to be A7, and add negative 3. So what does A7 have to be? Negative 17. Can you check it by adding negative 3 again? Make sure you get A8 equals negative 20. Yeah, if you add 3 again, negative 3, sorry, you get negative 17 plus negative 3 is negative 20. But what if you want, here's the wrench in that plan. If all I were asked for were to find, if I just wanted to find A7, then that plan would have worked great, right? But now I want A15. It's not too big. I could keep adding negative 3 until I got to A15, but this is where the explicit formula comes in kind of handy though, right? All right, so I'm going to kind of back, and this is going to happen to you in the homework. You're going to, so I'm doing this on purpose. You're going to maybe backtrack and, yeah, okay, reluctantly go ahead and fill in that formula and then see if you can find A1. So, in other words, let's go ahead and do what we were going to do originally. Fill in that formula. Let me shrink this down a little bit so we can keep everything on the same screen. Can you still see that? So then this formula, once we know D, this formula becomes, we don't quite have everything we need. We don't know what A1 is yet, do we? We have A1 plus n minus 1 times D was negative 3, right? Can anybody think of a way, other than recursively going backwards and getting down to A1, can anybody think of a way to get A1? Using something we haven't really used all that much yet, A8. A8's negative 20, right? So think about what that means. That means if I plug in 8 into this formula, 8 for n, that makes this, A1 doesn't change. But that makes this guy what? When I plug in 8, that makes it 7. I'll actually plug it in though. 8 minus 1 times negative 3, or 7 times negative 3. But I know what that equals, right? I know that A8 is negative 20, and so I can set up this little equation to find A1. Does that seem reasonable to you? Well, no, that's very unreasonable. It takes practice for that line of thinking, right? But you're just using what you're given and filling in equations, essentially, is what you're doing, and then solving. All right, so let's clean it up a little bit. Let me scroll down just a little bit. We get, what, A1, what did we say this was going to be? This is going to be 7 times negative 3. So you want to make it, instead of plus, minus 21. Does that make sense? Equal, don't yawn, you're going to make me yawn. Okay, equals negative 20. Oh, so what does A1 equal?
1.
Add 21 to both sides, and you get A1 is equal to 1. Okay, so now fill in this formula, you guys. What's AN?
AN equals 1 plus n minus 1 negative 3.
Times negative 3. Yep. Does everybody see what I did there? So all I did was fill in A1 is equal to 1, and then n minus 1, you leave it as n minus 1, and then, of course, I filled in D. Now, finding what was it, A15? Is that a big deal once we have the explicit formula? What do you do?
Plug in 15 for n.
Can we compute that? What is that? 1 plus 14 times negative 3? What's 14 times negative 3?
3 is negative
22?
42.
42. So negative, okay, so 1, let's call it 1 minus 42.
Yep.
So we get negative 41. So there's your A15. And then, of course, earlier on we found A7. Where is it at? Right here. I shrank it down. It was hard to find. Okay, so negative 17 and negative 41.